Hello, if you are new here, my name is Jasmine. I am a realistic pencil artist. Thank you so much for being here. Please subscribe if you like tutorials, and feel free to comment any questions you have, or if you want me to do a specific tutorial, I will. I mainly work in colored pencil, so I've been doing some tutorials on my current Aquaman drawing that I procrastinated on for several years. This year I finally decided to color it, and that's what you're looking at right now. So this is the second tutorial of Aquaman. We're gonna just focus on the left side of his face where all of the shadowing is, because that's the side of the face that I color first if that's the darkest side. This is sped up a little bit. I was trying to stay around the 20-minute mark. So here I'm using either the dark flesh or the sepia. I believe I am using the sepia for the nose because the side of his nose is very dark, since that's the side that has all the shadows, and then I followed that up with the burnt sienna to give that side of the face a warmer tone while also blocking in some of the color on his cheeks. So for the side of his face where the nose is kind of down there in the corner, like under the cheekbone, I used this color from Caran D'Ache called Dark Flesh. It is a dark brown, but it's not really an opaque brown. I would say the sepia is a little bit more opaque than this one. So Dark Flesh is kind of like a chocolate brown. It does really come in handy because it's very easy to blend. For some reason, the lead in this particular shade is one of the easier browns to blend, whereas the sepia is a little bit more crumbly. I do manage to use that for some of the shadow work. Some of the other colors I use on this side of the face are purple. Two of the colors that help set his face back in space would be this color called Burnt Sienna 50%. It's a very unusual color. It's kind of like a mauve, but it's a more muted one. This one I use to add more of a dark pinkish tone to his face. There's also another color called Violet Brown. It is violet, however, it is a tiny bit more of a brownish tone, so you can actually use yellow with it because purple and yellow are complementary on the color wheel, and you'll get a darker brown, but more of like a shadowy brown, if that makes sense. And that is what I use for under the eye. After that, I decided to use the Perylene Brown, and I think I used the French Gray for under the eye as well. Another color that comes in handy to add a little bit more orange to the face is the Burnt Ochre. It's a very, very orangey tan. Actually it's more of an orangey yellow. It's like a dark orangey yellow. Kind of hard to describe, but whenever I see a face that probably needs it, I'm like, oh, that's the color that I need. Brown ochre is a little bit close to the burnt ochre. I would say brown ochre is more yellow. It's a very dark yellow, and that also helps with adding an undertone to the face. I use that color a lot. For the nostrils, I actually started just with pure black. So as I got closer to the outside of the nostrils, I used the sepia color, and then I paired that with the dark flesh as well as the burnt ochre. As you can see, the first and second layers I usually color in vertical lines, and then I will go over those lines in another direction using the exact same pencil colors. That is to get the white areas of the paper filled in. I don't really like coloring super heavy. I'm trying to work on that. I know there's some artists that can just go in on a face and just color it one color very heavily in one section, and I'm way too scared to do that for fear of ruining it. I'm sure I'll get there, but I'm not ready yet. And I feel like this technique that I use allows me to add a little bit more detail without doing a lot of extra effort, because when you add 4 or 5 layers of pencil, there's a lot of depth in the color, and you can add more dots to kind of add like pores and texture to the face. Plus you have the X-Acto knife and the battery erasers. Those are super versatile in adding skin texture and all kinds of other details, as we've talked about before. For the side of his face that's furthest away, I will use the sepia to get that edge of the face to like go back in space. So here I am coloring that edge of the face to start giving his face some depth. You can kind of see it's starting to look a little bit three-dimensional. The other color I like to use a lot with the burnt sienna is this pink color. He does have a little bit of pink. The two colors that I'm using right now are the burnt sienna. I have this pink color called Anthraquinoid pink. It is a very bright pink. I like using it when I'm adding texture to things like the cheeks and the forehead. His forehead has quite a bit of pink in it, so I did use quite a bit of that. So here on his cheek, I did add in that pink color, And the other color that adds more warmth to his face would be the burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is a little bit deeper of a tan color. It's more rich. It is really great for skin tones, and it mixes really well with white and buff titanium and beige. Bottom corner of his face where the beard starts, that is where I start coloring it a little bit darker. And then I went ahead and used the sepia again for the side of the face where his eyes are, because that side of the face is very, very far back in space. I try to keep my pencils as sharp as possible when I'm coloring the face because that allows me to get a little bit more detail in, and it's easier to fill in the white spots on the paper. I would say once I hit the 4th layer of coloring, I start to put a little bit more pressure on the pencils to really get the color down. I am still coloring in vertical lines for the most part. I want to fill in all of that area with that color because that is starting to give it a little bit of a 3D look, and that area of the paper still has to be kind of dark, so I do still have to add in dots. So with that section of the paper, I am still using the dark color because that is going to help me set that back in space. The paper, I had a little bit of issues with it because at some point over the years it got damaged. Unfortunately, the forehead, there is a spot on there, and then there is a spot way in the upper right hand corner where it was taped, where I guess maybe it was already torn a little bit before, but the tape is starting to take off like the top layer of the paper, so I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do with that. The sharper the pencils are, the easier it is to blend. I would say that is probably the 3rd layer of color that I'm adding, not the 4th. There are a couple colors I did put on top of that to get everything to be more cohesive, get everything to blend together, so it doesn't look like there's a bunch of different patches of color on his face. Another technique that's great when you are using very sharp pencils is to color in tiny little circular motions without pressing too hard, using lighter pressure to get the circular motions, and that helps you fill in the paper a little bit easier. I mean, I technically used both of those techniques when I was doing this. I found it to be very helpful. I know I'm a little bit in the way of the lighting. I did actually move the lights after this. For under the eyes is very tricky because you want to color it darker without making it look like the person has like dark circles under their eyes or that they have really bad eye bags. One of the things that came in handy was the French gray. Those other 2 colors that I was talking about earlier, the violet brown, that one was great to use when I paired it with the burnt sienna 50%. So the violet color, I actually paired that with the brown ochre because it's a yellow toned brown, light brown, and that really helped to get the under eyes set. I used a lot of dots for the under eyes as well, and then I went in with the X-Acto knife to add in highlights because he does have a little bit of highlights where his eyelids are and a little bit in the corner under his eye. I add lots of dots to add more texture to the face, and it adds a little bit more texture when you add certain colors. It doesn't take away from the appearance of the entire drawing, but it does allow your eye to kind of like see that it's blended. And this was a way for me to add in a little bit more pink to his face without having to do a huge layer of pink. So where the beard is, I used 2 different reds. I used the Perylene brown, which is like a really brownish red or reddish brown. I think it's more red than brown. And then I went over that with 2 different greens. One of them was the dark sap green, so I mixed that with the permanent red. The other green that I used was the grass green, which is a very vibrant, bright green. Next to that, I started coloring in the hair a little bit, so that's what the black sections are. I'm kind of mapping out where the beard is. I do have a very hard time drawing beards, so I have to be very picky with how I map those out on the face. I don't want them to look like the beard is just sitting on the face and like as a whole separate section that just got stuck onto the face. It has to look like it's part of the same face. I used more of the brown colors that I mentioned earlier, the sepia and then the chocolate brown, to get his under eyes. And here I am setting the eyelid back in space, so it looks like his eyelid is more rounded, so the far corner of his eyelid is farther back, middle of his eyelid is more forward, so that's going to be a brighter color. Burnt sienna once again, mapping out the side of the nose. I did use a little bit of black where the side of the nose is, just so I know that when I color brown over that later, the brown is going to be like the darkest brown it can possibly be, since it's going to be a shadow brown. So I went in again with the burnt ochre, and that's adding a lot more warmth to the face. face, as you can see. So here I am using the burnt sienna again to add more warmth under the eyes, and then I went over that with the burnt sienna 50%, which is that mauve brown color, and I put that under the eyes. I was able to create a shadow under the eyes without having to use black. And you can kind of see here where I'm using the small circular motions to color on that side of the face. I think I used that when I was working on the forehead as well, just to get everything to blend together. On the right side of the nose, I began using the burnt ochre, that orangey yellow color. That is a great color for when the sun is shining on somebody's face, or it looks like it, and they have warm tones in their face. You can start seeing that in certain pictures. I think the most challenging part of this drawing was probably the eyebrows. I'm not good at drawing eyebrows. Like, I use the French gray under the eyebrows to create a shadow under that, and he just has kind of like wide eyebrows, so I found it to be a little bit challenging. The eyes were actually quite easy. And that is what I have so far. I will be back with another video next week. I do post a lot of shorts, usually 3 to 5 per week, so you'll see those throughout the week. It's usually throwback stuff or stuff that I'm currently working on. And feel free to check out my website where you can see more of my work. It's jasminebakerart.com. I do sell a lot of prints. I have like handmade keychains. I have original artwork. Please subscribe if you like watching these tutorials. It is a free way to support the channel. I appreciate it so much. I will see you guys next week. Bye.